everyone, and thank you for joining this North to Shore virtual series, Creative Pathways, and our first event in this series, Cultivating Advocacy, Leveraging the Arts for Food Justice. My name is Ali Meyer-Lakuta, and I'm the Senior Director for Arts and Wellbeing at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. So we know from visual arts installations to performance pieces and storytelling, creative expression can inspire action and challenge systemic injustices within our food systems. So I'm really thankful that you're all joining us for this dynamic panel of artists, activists, and experts who will share innovative and creative approaches to addressing food equity issues in New Jersey and beyond. I have the great honor of introducing Elisabet Velazquez. She is a Boricua writer from Brooklyn, now living in Jersey City. Her debut young adult novel in verse called When We Make It gained wide recognition, including a 2021 Goodreads Reader's Choice nominee, Indies Introduce a Next List selection, among others. She'll be joining us as a panelist and a performer today, so she'll open us up with her poem called Hood Credit. So, Elisabet, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ali. I don't see, oh, there goes my camera. We're on lag time. Thanks so much. It's so awesome to be here. I'll be reading a poem from my novel in verse called When We Make It, which follows the journey of a young girl named Sarai, who is growing up in Bushwick, Brooklyn, in the 90s, alongside her two sisters and her mother. And she's just trying to figure out what it means to make it. What does it mean to struggle with houselessness and food insecurity, and also be successful. So in this poem, Sarai who's living in this sort of food desert, is explaining how her and her family get food. So this is called Hood Credit. Hood Credit. So check it. It goes like this. Goldo, the bodeguero, needs to make money to stay in business, and Mommy needs to feed Estrella and me. The relationship is a no-brainer. Trust is a huge part of it. The bodeguero needs to trust Mommy is going to pay her bill when she gets paid, and Mommy needs to trust the bodeguero won't suddenly switch up his borrowing policy in the middle of one of our hunger tantrums. Fiao is a kind of credit that only has value in the hood. It's borrowing money from the bodega when you ain't got no money. Just like a credit card or a loan from the bank if you think about it. Except the banks won't trust us to borrow money. And the only card Mommy got is the welfare card. But who needs any of that when you got Goldo? Listen, next to Jesus, Goldo is the most revered saint on the block. Jesus feeds us spiritually, and Goldo actually feeds us. Fiao is an unspoken pact to keep each other alive in a world that doesn't care if we die. Goldo could be a journalist too, if you think about it. He has a composition notebook he writes in just like me, except the only way you can guess the people's stories in his book is by looking at how much they owe. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Elisabet. That was powerful. I'd like to invite our other panelists to come on camera. Great, thank you. Wonderful. I'm Triada Stampas. I'm president and CEO of Fulfill. That's the food bank that serves Monmouth and Ocean counties at the Jersey Shore. And I've been an advocate for anti-hunger and food justice issues for more than 15 years. And I am thrilled to be moderating this panel this afternoon on leveraging the arts for food justice. First, let me thank Ali and the team at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center for putting together this impactful panel as part of a series on the intersection of the arts and health. And also would like to thank the Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation and Prudential for sponsoring the series. It's taken the talents and resources of many, many people to bring us together this afternoon. And for that, I am grateful. Just last month, Feeding America, put out a report that showed that here in New Jersey, more than 1 in 10 of our neighbors is experiencing food insecurity. That's nearly 1 million adults, children, and seniors who don't have consistent access to enough of the food that they need to thrive. In the 2 counties that Fulfill serves, the number of people relying on food pantries and soup kitchens has doubled since the pandemic. So I've just thrown a bunch of statistics at you. They're big, and they tell you something important about the situation that we face here in New York City. In New Jersey, but they don't tell you anything about the experience of food insecurity or what it feels like or what it's like to live it. And that's where the arts come in. So we're joined here by Elisabet and 3 other wonderful panelists who bring to different perspectives and experiences to their art. And the one thing that they have in common is that they've all decided to center food and food justice in their creative work. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. And as part of your introduction, please share how food justice came to be part of your artistic expression. And Elisabet, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Elisabet Velazquez. I am a young adult author. My debut novel is When We Make It. It is a novel in verse. And the poem that I read is from that novel. I believe that my most powerful weapon against any kind of injustice, but in this case, food insecurity, has always been making sure that my humanity stays intact. So when I was writing the characters in When We Make It, who are facing food insecurity, housing insecurity, because we know that these things are often connected and interlinked, I wanted to make sure that the reader saw and understood these characters in the entirety of their humanity. And so when I'm writing about these issues for and about young people who are experiencing food insecurity, I'm not, even though the numbers are important and statistics are important as a whole, I'm not necessarily focused on that. I'm not focused on terminology that I think can often be so foreign or alienating for young people. I'm looking at the story, right? I'm looking at the humans at the center of these issues. And the story, when I was growing up, right, I didn't know what being food insecure was, right? It was, that wasn't the story. The story didn't say I'm food insecure. The story said, I'm waiting on a long line at the local food pantry because that's all there is, right? The story doesn't say I'm economically disenfranchised. Those were words that I learned, after I became an adult and started working in this industry. But the story says, we got to wait till the first of the month to afford food, right? It doesn't say I live in a food desert. It says, hey, I got to get my food at the bodega because the supermarket by me doesn't have what we need or is too expensive, right? So I wanted to make sure that we remain close to the story, to the people, and that is the way that I incorporate it into my work so that when I'm in schools and I'm speaking with young people, they're able to relate to these stories, and then we can begin to have conversations which then lead to, advocacy and ultimately change.
Thank you. Lindsay, let's turn to you next.
Sure, thank you, and so good to be here. I'm trying to show my my fellow artist here, Carolina Moratti. So it's both of us in one room, sharing the screen. I have the big head; she's got the little head today. But I'll start by saying we both work for Middlesex County government, and I work for the Arts Institute. We're really lucky that here in Middlesex County, all of our taxpayers pay into a cultural trust fund, which is really unique. And it gives us the basis for our mission, which is to provide arts, culture, and history experiences for everyone, but also to leverage those skills and talents and the collective talents of our artists to support quality of life outcomes. And sometimes those things, of course, are beyond arts, culture, and history. And so obviously, food insecurity and food equity is top of our list and top of our list for all of our residents. we wanted to speak to specifically today about one program that's called Share Your Foodways. And I love this program. It came out at the beginning of the pandemic. We had been granted some funding that was tied directly to folk life. And we were supposed to use that funding to really explore cultural traditions throughout Middlesex County. And the funding, as some people who work in nonprofits know, was also directly not supposed to go to food. Oftentimes, that's one of the biggest struggles we have, is that we get funding, but we can't spend it on food. So when we asked our residents, and in specific our food banks, what they needed and how we could help, and they said food, we had to be creative. And so we started to think about food and culinary arts as a form of arts, and of course as a cultural commodity and a way to express one's traditions and stories and backgrounds and community. And so we wrote a grant called Share Your Foodways. We partnered with our local food pantry, and I would be remiss in not acknowledging some incredible people who helped bring this to light. It was really a team effort. Sally Vanderwater is one of our folklorists here on staff, Isha Valles, and then also Jennifer Apostle, who runs our network of food pantries. So we banded together. We hired culinary artists. Carolina was the first one we hired, and we kept her all throughout. And we created videos to not only share recipes, cultural recipes that were possible to be created with food pantry items, but also more importantly, maybe to share stories and cultural histories and personal histories and traditions. And so for every video that we created, every tutorial, we also created kits and put them throughout the food pantry. So 100 kits for every video, so that people had those supplies that they needed to make those cultural meals. I think one of the most important things that did, besides putting food on tables and getting recipes into people's hands, was to really help with the destigmatization part of it. People oftentimes come into food pantries, and especially if they're new to a food pantry, like so many folks were at the beginning of the pandemic, they come in a place of shame. And to be able to come in to be appreciated and to see their families' recipes celebrated and put on this platform for everyone to see, and to have those stories really shared, brings not only a humanity, but I think a celebration of the different types of cultures we have here in the county. We're so diverse, and I know that you all from our neighboring counties share that too. And so that was really something that was exciting for us to do. But I'm going to pass it off to Chef Carolina.
Can you see me?
I'll get out of the
Yes.
page so you can they can see you unadulterated.
Let me see.
The magic of Zoom here.
Okay, I think everybody can see me now. You can see.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay. I'll get up.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor. My name is, like Lindsay says, Chef Carolina. I started with the program of Share Your Foodways as one of the cooks that were coming to perform. At that time, I was doing something called Cooking Outside the Box, which was cooking with the ingredients of the boxes that you get of the food banks, with the intention of teaching people how to cook with those ingredients. And my key moment, it was always to try to figure it out, how to make that a nice experience, how to honor the food that we receive and then make it work. So when I joined the team here with the Arts Institute, it was just making it work. So we were able to do too many transitions, not only bringing the traditions of food, the cultural part with the food and doing the kits, but also we went to different ways. We keep walking with the program. So we started cooking at the actual food banks and food pantries, grabbing the stuff that they're receiving for that week and making a dish out of it together with the moms, with the recipients of the bags. Also going into the schools and creating recipes with the students. I make sure the kids know and we have the conversation and how it feels to go to a food bank or a food pantry and cook with those ingredients. We talk about it. Some of the schools we work as Greater Brownsville School, and they got their food bank every Wednesday, and I go to cook with them every Wednesday, and we do the same thing. We grab those ingredients. We talk about how cool it is to be able to cook with the stuff that you get from the school. And we also reutilize the ingredients the stuff that they get for snacks at the school. So we incorporated those ingredients to a recipe. We cook together, and we make sure they understand to cook with all of that is something nice to do. And I linked that with the technology. So we do recipes from TikTok. We do recipes that are like the kids that get interested to it. So, and we use the ingredients that we get on the food bank. So I work into giving Latinidad a las latas, and make my latas and my boxes of food cool for the students. At the end of my class, my students don't finish class if they don't know how to properly open a can. They get the can opener. We work together, and we work into how cool it is to cook with the stuff that you get on the food banks and the pantries. We talk about seeing each other in a condition like that and help each other out if somebody's making fun of them for going to places like that. We do things like from Barbie pasta to a regular fruit salads from the cans. And they get excited, and cooking is cool, and going to a food pantry is super cool in this area. So I'll keep doing that. I'll keep working with the community to make sure the parents know and the kids get excited for that. And I also give them their own cooking book. So they write their recipes every week. So they own it. They earn their points, they earn their status as a chef. And at the end of the class, they finish being a chef. So there is a different divisions that we keep growing through Share Your Foodways, and we look forward to the future to keep teaching people how to cook and making it cool for the students and making it accessible for the families. But I'm so honored to be part of this program.
Thank you, Carolina. And I saw some of your videos. You do the recipes and you narrate in English and in Spanish at the same time. So make it really accessible.
We're fully bilingual, and we try to incorporate other languages as well. The main reason of this is how do you bring your flavors and your ingredients to America without losing your identity, and applying the ingredients and adapting as well. But we try to be welcoming to everybody and making sure that everybody feels that we dignify this process of going to a food bank. And if we need it, it's so good to go and make sure to be able to work with whatever we have in there. So it's a challenge sometimes, but the majority of times people feel so included, so honored that we are using their ingredients and we're using our ingredients and we're making the food. But yes, we go fully bilingual. Sometimes I feel like my brain is frying a bit, but yes, we'll be able to go bilingual most of the times.
And I would say Carolina, in addition to being a really incredible chef and presenter and cook, she's also you could be like a talk show host as well, because we really strive to represent a lot of different cultural communities from across the county. So we have worked with the Ukrainian immigrant group with refugees who have just come here, as well as the Afghani groups. And so we have all these different ethnicities represented in our chefs. And Carolina is so curious just by nature that you do a great job of questioning them about where did these recipes come from? Who did you learn them from? What kind of dishes do you use to present them on? All those kinds of things that really honor their folk life heritage. So I think that's another really big piece of this. It's very cool.
Thank you. I think I put a lot of efforts into that, because the same way I want people to understand and learn my culture, I want to make sure all cultures are learned and respect the same way, because otherwise my grandmother will come in.
Thank you. We've gotten a question in the chat, so we'll turn it over to Hiram to introduce himself. But Lindsay and Carolina, if you could drop into the chat a link to the YouTube channel, that's the question that came up.
Thank you, Triada. I have been so looking forward to joining this group of creatives under the umbrella of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. How brave of you folks to bring the arts and culture to bear on the food justice effort. That's often not done, and it needs to be done more of, because, as you've just heard and seen with Elisabet's wonderful poem, the arts can bring the heart and the soul to bear. So I'm Hiram LaRue. I had a career in the food insecurity or food security realm, worked at U.S. Department of Agriculture and at U.S. Agency for International Development on international and domestic hunger programs and issues. I was a poet the entire time I was working. When I retired, I had a chance to bring those two worlds together. And I formed what was called an initiative called Poetry X Hunger, to bring a world of poets to the anti-hunger cause, or said slightly differently, to turn poetry into food. I'll say a little bit more about all that as we have our kind of discussion and questions and responses and all. But I'd like, in addition to the powerful poem that Elisabet presented, I'd like to share another piece of evidence that poetry can, in fact, speak back to hunger. This is a public service announcement that you'll see. I believe Ali is getting it queued up. It was produced, the public service announcement was produced by Feed the Children, a huge organization that works internationally and domestically here in the US to fight hunger. And this public service announcement incorporates a Poetry X Hunger poem by the wonderful Canadian poet, Josephine Lauret, as the PSA's message. This video has been viewed on YouTube by more than 100,000 viewers, and it recently received 5 national Telly Awards. So I think we're ready to see the video.
If words were enough, I would sate your hunger. I would build for you a well, ever filled with water clean. I would work alongside as you till the field. Watch hope emerge green from the brown earth. If words were enough, I would end our misery. Watch each child of yours grow strong and true. Teach them to read and to write and to sing, so that their voices be forgotten nevermore. If words were enough, I would help you bear your burden, bring healing to your wounds, end strife. See beyond the lines on a map, beyond color, and you would know you are my sister, my brother, my child. If words were enough.
Thank you, Ali. That's Josephine's poem titled Enough, in a PSA titled If Words Were Enough, produced by Feed the Children. Thanks so much.
That was powerful. Thank you for sharing that. As you all were introducing yourselves, I heard words like humanity and honor and destigmatization and soul and heart. And so I think that kind of brings me to my first question, which is, talk to us a little bit about the ways that you find our artistic expression helps communicate the complexities of issues, and these food justice issues especially, to diverse audiences. How do you connect, and what have you found to be the most impactful strategies for conveying complexity in a way that connects with people? And any of you can jump in, whoever wants to jump in first.
I'll start. I'll say that I think, food is universal, and the need to eat is a universal thing, that whether you're interested in the arts, hold on, let me try to see if I can center myself so I don't fade.
Okay.
There we go. Whether you're interested in the arts or not, everybody needs to eat. And it's also something that, unless you don't have enough of it, it's it's a joyful, fun, pleasurable, fulfilling experience that relates to your personal histories, your stories. It is an art, and it's creative, and it's act of making. And just like an audience member at a play, in eating a good meal, it's just as impactful and powerful as a sensory experience than any other art experience that you might enjoy. Again, it comes to when people don't have enough, or when they go without, then that experience turns around and it becomes stigmatizing. It becomes, it can become miserable and upsetting and things like that. So when we do the work that we do, that's our aim, is to bring it back into the realm, not only to provide that food and that nourishment and that basic human need, but also to provide those other pieces, those sensory experiences, those linkages to stories and personal histories and loved ones, and all those kind of like memories that flood back when you have a piece of good food in your mouth. And the creative experience, the idea of getting your hands messy and touching the materials and, engaging all five senses. I think that's what's important, is to bring the joy back to it. And that's what we can offer through the lens of art.
Joy back to it. What we found, I love that response. What we found in engaging with communities, with houses of worship, at bars, on the Hill, with Congress, and with decision makers in general, is that we need all of the data, all the statistics, all of the trend lines about hunger to understand it. As I believe it was Triada mentioned at the beginning, hunger is on the rise, and it's alarmingly so, and we need to know that. But we also realize that the heart is a better listener and understander than are the ears. The heart understands the complexities of hunger. And so I think the arts tend to reach our hearts better than data, statistics, or trend lines, and reaches those hearts and souls in a way that is a bit more fulsome, more human, and more enduring. So we've seen the power, in our case, of poetry, to have people who simply weren't paying attention look up and tune in to especially a young poet performing their work.
Does anyone
Yeah,
else
and
understand?
I'll
Okay.
add that I think that I'm going to double down here and say that I think that it's so amazing and wonderful and important, the work that folks are doing here, like Lindsay and Carolina and Hiram, on destigmatizing the shame that comes with a lot of this. I am a product of the work of the work that folks like Carolina and Triada have done. I was the kid who was standing on the line at the food pantry, right? And I grew up embarrassed of that, because there wasn't a place to talk about it, right? There wasn't anywhere to say, hey, this weekend I got my dinner from a bag at the local church, right? There was a box, and some of the things in those boxes weren't necessarily things that we ate, right? Or didn't know how to cook, or didn't know how to utilize, because the boxes would maybe sometimes comes with things that felt out of place. It was like a can and then a cereal box, right? And it was like, well, what do we do with this? Because they ran out of the rice, right? So there wasn't necessarily a place to talk about those things. And so it's really important to have these conversations. I'm in awe that there are now folks like Carolina going into schools and talking to young people openly, and folks like Hiram who are using poetry to sort of, as this avenue, because I grew up knowing that I needed to tell this story, right? I needed to talk about it, and I utilize art to sort of open up those conversations. And when I am in schools with young people, oftentimes the first thing they'll say to me is, I've never read anything like this in a book that resembled my life. I've never spoken about this to anyone. How do you know, right? And so there's that relatability there that I think is important, but there's also a lot of nuance, a lot of nuance. And there's, I think that we often relate food insecurity with sadness. There's a lot of joy that folks are experiencing as well, and I think that those things get to live together. And so that's the work is important. The arts are important. These conversations are so important, and we can't have enough of them. We need more.
Carolina, do you want to add?
Yes, how we can do this through art, right? I was asking the same thing myself, but when we curate the videos, when we make sure we go bilingual, when we make sure we work with each of the kids, like Elisabet was saying, she's the product of it. Me too. As a chef, how do I learn how to cook, right? And then when I came to America, I was a single mom, so I was on that line too. I was getting my box of products every month, and I tried to figure it out. How do I'm going to make a healthy meal, or how do I'm going to make a decent meal with the stuff that I'm not familiar with? Because let alone, we don't have cans in Peru where I'm from. And it's a challenge. So I have to go through all of that to understand how can I cope with it? How can I make a good meal of this? How can I teach the moms? How can I feel that and put it into the arts, through culinary arts, and make a meal and make this something interesting to them? From the moment we create the recipe cards and we do it bilingual, a lot of arts is included there. From the moment we do the videos, from the moment we created the pictures, from the moment we do the visual part, we have a mobile kitchen. So we have a glass on top of them. That's my Martha Stewart moment, when I can see the cameras and I can see the glass on top of the meal that I'm doing. I always joke around and I say, I'm going to be the next Martha Stewart, Latino Martha Stewart, with no jail time, but that's another conversation. But it is the fact that how do we make all of these, and we marry to the arts to be able to make it comfortable, affordable, to make it so comfortable so people feel good coming into my class, or good coming into the food bank and be like, oh, this week we have class with Chef Carolina, and the kids look forward to it. We have a waiting list now on the Greater School for our classes, because now all the kids want to be part of it. So we make an inspiration, so the kids get inspired to take their friends in there, and they're like, oh, Chef Carolina, this is the only class that I ate the food for. So how do we make that food that initially is a stigma or it's like an embarrassment, and we make it something that everybody wants to have? Everybody wants to have the cooking books. And the only thing that I do is grab those notebooks from the dollar store, and I put a sticker that it says, you share your food waste. And it says, this is your chef cooking book. The kids own that so much and love that so much that they're like, I want this. I want to be part of this. So that's what the arts gave me the chance to make this something that people want, something that people decide to be part of it. And I'm all for it. And I'm going to keep working towards that. So the parents and the moms and all of that feel like this is something good, together with the recipe cards and the food kits that we sent. We're really able to make this something very dignified, people feel good receiving that bag, the same bags that you will get on those subscriptions, that you get all your ingredients and your recipe bag. They take you out of your problem for a minute. You feel like a person. You feel like there's no problems behind you, and you're gonna make a meal, and you're gonna love this meal, and you're gonna have your recipe card. So the power that we have through the arts to be able to do this is everything to me.
I want to add really quickly because it made me think of agency and how oftentimes folks can sort of feel like the power is in this government entity, like you control the next time I'm going to eat, or I can only eat on these on these days when the food pantry is open. And the work that the arts do, and listening to Carolina made me think about how the arts really return agency to someone, right? When young people are calling themselves a chef, that's a sort of autonomy. That's like, okay, now I'm back in control of what I'm eating. I'm back in control of the story that I'm telling. And I think that's something that is super, super important, to be able to feel like you're in control of, what's sustaining you, of your nourishment.
Yeah, you've all talked a bit about in your answers. I thought it was really interesting about universality and bringing people together through food and through art. And Hiram, I loved what you said about, the heart is sometimes a better listener than the ear in understanding the complexities of human experience. We've gotten a question in the Q&A, which I think is a good segue, which is about, the arts bring people together. How do you think of the arts as bringing about kind of community action, for policy change, for community change, this binding power that the arts have? Who wants to start with that?
I can go. It's a kind of a story that I just really love. So when we make these videos, we really want to make them for everybody, not just those folks who might identify as food insecure or things like that. We really want to make meals that everybody can enjoy, no matter where they are at. And as anybody who is a foodie knows, sometimes the most economical and the most resourceful meals take center stage now at the highest end restaurants, right? And so it's been fun to see the way that people from all over and across all different economic backgrounds react to this. And I would say that those recipe cards, when we hand them out, are snapped up across the board all over the place. So in one instance that we had, we were working with one of our Afghani chefs, and she leads a group of Afghani refugees who have settled here in Middlesex County. And she was co-leading an episode with Carolina. You can see it on the website, and it was picked up by the Library of Congress to reproduce. But we had a donation made to that episode of saffron, and so that was something that we were able to then include in all of the kits. So I don't know, I just thought that was really special. I've never had saffron in my life before. I've never bought it. I've never used it. Yeah, it's a spice, and it's a very, very expensive spice, but we were able to include it into all those kits. And so I think there's something really special about, especially what you do, Chef Carolina, is elevating those dishes. And it's not just using whatever, it's certainly using what you have and being resourceful, but it's also making magic out of what you have. And I think that's a really nice thing. And we got into the whole background of saffron and why it's used and how it's created and where it's grown. And that's just like, I think those stories that come out of this work are just fascinating.
And also the fact that we include, like you said, we're not necessarily including the people who is only getting services on the food bank. We also include the community. We were able to teach the community how to make tortillas, and we were able to bring cultural part as well when we bring the batan, which is the Peruvian sauces maker, which is a stone to stone. We have one on the Art Institute. We actually have the only one in America of those batanes is in the Art Institute. Here we have it. One of my family members was so nice to send it to us. So we have that. We also have the metate. We were able to do that on the Mexican culture with the corn and teach people at a local event how to make the tortillas. So we have actually in arts and cultural part of heritage, and how do we bring the culinary arts with the arts together and teach people like this is what you can also do with cooking, and we show them how it's also the experience of going. We're glad you're fortunate to have enough at your home, but we also want to put you close into how it feels. And back to the students, when they claim to be a chef, we also, at the end of class, I gave them aprons with their name on it. And they go home being chefs with their aprons, with their name on it, with a certificate. So we make sure that we honor each and every kid who's putting all the efforts to do and engage and embrace the fact that they're getting services in there.
Yeah, one other thing, Elizabeth, I love the poem that you started us out with. And I think about the community heroes that there are in all of these communities, like the bodega owner. The chefs that we work with, many are community heroes. They're their only cultural representation of food in the area. They're a place that reminds everybody of home. They're a place that the kids know about. And often, in many cases, a lot of the chefs we work with also started out as recipients of the food bank system too. And so they're very honest about that, and they're able to really serve as mentors and be examples of being food recipients themselves, and now being, like you said, in complete control and of their own destinies and serving the public. So that's really exciting.
I really appreciate the question as well, in terms of how can the arts move folks to action and affect change. And I mean, many people have thought and written and tried to put actions behind just that kind of idea. In terms of poetry, we have found that partnerships with other artists have been very effective. Visual artists, musical artists. We haven't had a chance to collaborate with dancers yet, or with culinary artists, but would like to do all of those. With the visual artists, we've been able to use the products of co-creation, art and poetry, to raise funds for anti-hunger groups. Now, that's not necessarily changing policy, but it is hopefully putting the poems to work. We've also recently been wondering about, okay, are there ways to use poems to speak up about elections? We have to be kind of careful because Poetry X Hunger is a 501c3, so we can't advocate for a particular candidate, but we certainly can advocate for a cause, fighting hunger. And we know that poems, like music, like artwork, can rouse, can challenge, can shout, can pound fist, can also try to lead to greater understanding generally. And so how to use that power, how to harness it to actually make change, not only in terms of dollars and raised awareness, but maybe even affect voting, is something that we're kind of interested in. But it's an excellent question.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that Poets X Hunger is a great example of the way that arts can affect, and talk about these social issues. One of the things I made sure to do in my book was have a resource list on the back of the book. So we might not be able to change policy right away, because we know that takes a very long time, but we can make a very impactful changes, and we can point folks who are experiencing these issues in the right direction. And so I made sure that, young people who were experiencing these issues knew where to go, right? Knew who to talk to. There is also a guided discussion, a discussion guide in the back of the book for educators who might be reading this book with their young people, and, have a sort of a place to have that sort of safe conversation around these things. I think that ultimately, ultimately, when I think of effective artistic expression, I think that it leads to conversations, which then lead to movement, which then lead to change. And it's sort of this step tiered approach for me. It's not just one, we're gonna have this art installation and then tomorrow the policy is going to be changed, but we're going to have this art installation and we're going to have conversation about it, and there's going to be buzz, and then folks are going to see that this is an issue that we really need to pay attention to. And so I think that that's one of the ways that can happen.
I like that progression, Elizabeth. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about where you have seen artistic projects or initiatives play a role in kind of driving tangible change, either at the community level or all the way up to kind of, big policy and systems level. Would love to kind of hear any examples that you have or that come to mind for you.
Well, just last week, Poetry X Hunger was asked to identify a couple of the Poetry X Hunger poets to visit with and open a dinner meeting of about 50 young up-and-coming anti-hunger leaders drawn from low-resourced communities. And I know I'm biased, but I believe the poems that were presented by those poets opened ears, minds, and hearts, and began to have some of these future leaders understand the power of the arts, and especially of poetry. Also, as a member of what's called the Alliance to End Hunger, Poetry X Hunger signs on to many letters to Congress about the importance of SNAP and WIC and similar federal food assistance programs. So we try to kind of be there as an advocate, and because we're kind of organized, we can do that. And I would love to see the expressions on some of the faces of those receiving these kind of incoming letters to Congress. Poetry X Hunger, what is that? I can only imagine, but I love the shock value. So, we're trying to influence future leaders, current leaders, of course, but future leaders, and then also the policy dialogue on the Hill.
One of the things that I actually, while I was sitting with my role in this panel and thinking about the work outside of, the writing, I really didn't even think about this until I really sat with myself. But a lot of my food justice work happens at home, right? And it wasn't even something that I thought about. But I have an 11-year-old. I take care of two of my parents who are elderly and low income, and we're, often about food together, how to eat together. And so we cook together. We talk about food. We talk about what nutrition looks like with our, cultural foods, right? And so, I think that it's important to think about the ways that we're having conversations, not just on a larger level, but conversations in our communities, in our homes, even, so that folks often think about, how do I get involved? And we think about these really large, big initiatives, but sometimes it's about having these conversations with your children or with your parents. And I think that that's an important part of food justice as well.
Yeah. You're all kind of reminding me of, just in my own time in the anti-hunger space, this organization, Witnesses to Hunger, came about in Pennsylvania as a photo project where mothers whose children were receiving WIC benefits were given cameras and just asked to photograph their kitchens, their homes, their day-to-days. And the photos that came from that ended up becoming photo exhibits, and that were first shown in community, but made it to congressional offices. And while the Child Nutrition Act was being reauthorized, and that comes up every 5 years in federal policy, that's where school meals live in federal policy, where WIC lives. So these really important life-sustaining programs for children, members of Congress were displaying these photos as a way of giving window into the lives of people who are able to thrive because of those programs. So some really, really powerful examples of how the arts help move policy and move conversations beyond the statistics and the data.
And Triada, if I could just interject too.
Yeah.
I think this is always really important to consider here in the US. For so long, at least when I was growing up, hunger was considered to be over there. India, China, somewhere at sub-Saharan Africa. I'm sorry, hunger is all around us here in the States. And so we need to focus on it here in the States. But we also need to begin to use the arts, I believe, the creative arts in our programs internationally, where we engage with colleagues overseas as they try to surmount the hunger cause there. So I think pretty much everything that we've said here today is relevant to colleagues working around the world to fight hunger. Just wanted to interject that.
Thank you. No, and we're coming close to our time. We do have a couple of comments and questions that have come through the Zoom. And one question that's come up is really kind of about art as protest. And I'm wondering if you all can speak to, we've talked about art as advocacy in this food justice space. But do you all have thoughts about art as protest too? Protest against kind of the systems that create inequity in food and in access to food.
Well, music, poetry, the visual arts, all of the arts are remarkable tools of protest and have been used forever to raise voice and raise counter voice to what's happening. And to the extent that the arts are effective, sometimes it's a little bit hard to get a measure on that. But I believe that most conventional wisdom would say that the arts are incredibly powerful in opening eyes, minds and hearts to causes, and often in a protest sort of mode, unlike any kind of study or research paper can do.
Okay, final words from all of you. What advice do you have to others about how to collaborate to maximize their impact if they're interested in doing work in this space?
Maybe Lindsay and Carolina can say.
Sure, I'll start. I can't highlight enough how important it is to work not only with other artists, and so often it feels like we're preaching to the choir when we're in these kinds of panels and things like that. I think it's really essential that we work with people who wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as artists, or even people who don't identify themselves as art consumers. Secretly, I think everybody is an artist. Also secretly, I think art can heal the world and that we can fix everything through the arts. But it's really important to work with partners outside of the box. Sorry, Carolina, to use your pun.
Yes.
I think it's really important to pull all those resources together. So we work with farmers, we work with Rutgers Agricultural Co-op School. We work, of course, with the food banks, with transportation, with so many folks. And that's really how we get our work done, is by depending upon all those people who may or may not see themselves as creatives. Also, so many people who are chefs in their own right, but may not identify as chefs. That's something that's really important to us. And I know that we have some chefs and some of our greatest partners on joining us today. So a quick shout out to all those culinary artists and chefs and partners who have joined us for this panel today too. But I think that's the most important thing.
I'll also add, oh, go ahead, Carolina.
Yeah, I would like to add, I forgot to say I'm the box lady. Everything that I do is related to boxes, but that's another conversation as well. How we can do these partnerships. Maybe the people on the group or the people on the forum right here, not necessarily is too close to work with us, but share it. We are in a world right now that sharing information is key. So if you know somebody who can be willing to work with us or take us to another place that we can keep spreading the word about what we do, is the most important part. If we want to be part of the change and we're like, oh, I'm too busy, I have too much on my plate right now, maybe somebody else have a little bit more of a space on their plates. So share the information, give it to somebody else, and make sure like the connection is only an email. We are only an email away. Change the number, send the email, make the connection so we can keep working on it. Sometimes we don't think, maybe it's not the fit for us, but it's the fit for somebody else. So that will be the way that we can keep growing and make greater things together. That's the only way to really make it work, because you'll be impressed and amazed how many people we have coming in, chefs, people from the community, and they fall in love with the project, and then we keep on growing. And I'm so looking forward to keep doing this and more projects coming up. But again, if you want to be part of the change, it's very easy. You don't have to think the little bit that you can do is not going to change something, because it can be the beginning of something super, super great and giant. Just do that. Share and try to participate as much as you can.
Elisabet, it looked like you were going to jump in earlier.
Yeah, I know we're at time, so I'll just end really quickly by saying that I think that, in terms of connecting, it's really important, like Carolina said, to share those stories and to stay close to the stories of the people who are at the center of these issues. I think it's really important to witness. I think it's important to pay attention to the things that are happening in our communities as our communities change as a result of gentrification and all of these issues that are happening. I think about witnessing is just very, very important, and staying close to the stories. I'm thinking about the men and women and children in Gaza right now who are dying due to malnutrition, right? And the only reason we know about that is because they are sharing their stories and they're telling their stories. So pay attention, listen, to folks when they are talking to you about their stories. It's important to witness the reality of food injustice in the world, in our communities, and to center the people in the middle of that, and letting those stories then mobilize our actions and our connections to each other.
And I would only add, take risks. Don't take no for an answer, be persistent. If you approach a partner who you think is unapproachable, approach that partner, potential partner. And if they defer or deflect, don't give up. Continue to work with them, because as Lindsay said, it's often the unexpected partner from the non-traditional community that perhaps can make the biggest difference to your program. Thank you again so much for this entire program.
Thank you, Hiram. And thank you to all of our panelists, and thanks to everyone who was with us as an attendee. I feel I learned a lot, and I hope you all learned a lot too. We have 2 more panels coming up in our Creative Pathways series. Next Tuesday, we have a panel moderated by First Lady Tammy Murphy discussing how the arts can be used to address maternal health. And the following week will be a deep dive into our very own Arts RX, Arts on Prescription program here in Newark and how it addresses health equity. So I put the links in the chat to those. Please join us if you can, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks to everyone.